Hello everybody, it's me, the Real Local Maniac, and I'm back again with another 8-Bit Wars. Now, as you can see, today I'll be playing the classic arcade game, Chase HQ, which was made by Taito. Now, this is one of my favourite arcade machines ever, and I just couldn't wait for it to be converted to the 8-bit home computers. So, as always, we're going to start off with the arcade game, followed by the ZX Spectrum Amstrad and the Commodore 64. Now, before I do proceed, sometimes I have been asked before, like why I don't include other sort of 8-bit computers or machines in the 8-bit wars, and I'll quickly explain why that is. The reason being is, in the UK or in Britain, the three main home 8-bit computers were the ZX Spectrum, Amstrad and the Commodore 64. Now, I know other sort of like 8-bit systems were around, but the main 8-bit wars arguments in the school playgrounds that I basically found were the Spectrum, Amstrad and the Commodore 64. Right, so I've answered that. Let's quickly move on to the game. Now, what sort of game this is? Okay, this is basically, it's like a racer, but with an added bonus. It's not your standard racer. You basically play the role of a police officer, and it's your job to sort of like try and catch the baddie. So it's a nice different variation of the whole racer sort of theme, and that's what made this game stand out for me so much when I first played it. Because I mean, you had so many races that were exactly the same thing. You just had to sort of like try and beat the time. But this added like a nice twist to it. You know, the twist was you had to try and track down the baddie, bump the car off the road, and then that was it, you know. It was really good. But what I liked about this game as well was like the speed there. Now, I just activated my turbo there. So not only have you got your high gear and low gear, but you've also got your turbo boost as well, which does help you out if you can use it properly, unlike me. So yeah, guys, I want to quickly talk about the graphics in this game. You know, the graphics are really nicely done. They're big and bold there. They kind of remind me of the graphics style of, say, Outrun. That with the tunnel section and the way the scenery changes at the top. It's got some nice sampled speech. I also want you guys to pay attention to the music on this level as well. Right, I'm approaching the baddie now. But all in all, this is probably one of my favourite arcade games ever, and if you haven't tried it, you've got to check it out. There's a white car there. Gotta smash him. Right, so that is this ZX Spectrum version there. That is the title screen, or was that the loading screen? Now guys, before I proceed any further, check out that music. And that's the same music you can hear in the arcade game, in the first level. Now, this particular sort of music there is probably one of my favourites on the ZX Spectrum because it is absolutely amazing the way they've done it. Absolutely amazing. It sounds amazing, and I think they've done it in a really smart way, where they actually even included the beeper to add, you know, like a bit of an extra sort of like drum effect to it as well. So it's really smartly programmed. One of the best sort of like arcade conversions actually on the ZX Spectrum, which was made by Ocean. So there's the story there. There's Nancy. She's the one in the office, sort of like telling you who you've got to try and catch, which is the Idaho Slasher. So the vehicle is a white British sports car. Obviously, you know, it's not in colour on the ZX Spectrum, because it's specky after all. Now, despite the sort of like yellow sort of foreground there and the blue background at the top, the graphics are absolutely amazing. They're very, very, very similar to the arcade game. Even the sort of like the background sort of changes as well, and look at that, the way things move up and down. The programmers, it still amazes me how much they managed to squeeze from an arcade machine to an 8-bit computer. You know, it's just clever programming. Now there again, there's a split road down there, and this game's got all the little touches that the arcade game has. It basically it looks like the arcade game, but you know, a little bit scaled down. So if you can look past the actual colour, and you can see this game's got all the gameplay, it really does feel like the arcade game. It controls really, really well, and it's got a nice illusion of speed as well. The sound effects, you know, your typical standard sort of ZX, you know, Spectrum sound effects, I guess. And there's no music during the level, but you know, during the title screen, it's absolutely amazing. And like, there you go, you know, that tunnel section, beautifully recreated actually on the 8-bit computers, absolutely amazingly done. And I do believe, I might be right, that there's even a helicopter that appears in a second level which doesn't appear in the other versions. But all in all, this is probably one of the finest arcade conversions in ZX Spectrum, you know. It's amazing how they've done that. Now, the next version that's coming up is another amazing conversion, and that is the Amstrad version. Right, so there's no sort of title music there. But there's loads more colour. So I'm just going to sort of configure my controls there. Right. There we go. All sorted out. I've got my turbo button. Once again, it's done by Ocean. Conversion of the Taito game. Or is it Taito? I keep on forgetting. Someone keeps on telling me, and I keep on forgetting all the time. So once again, you've got Nancy there. Now, the thing about this Amstrad version, it's a great looking conversion. It really is going to be a bit of a tough 8-bit war between the ZX Spectrum and the Amstrad. Straight away, I'm going to say the Commodore 64 doesn't stand a chance in hell of winning because it's not a great conversion. But I'll talk a little bit more about that once the game sort of, you know, once that bit shows up. Now, I'm finding that the Amstrad version here moves a little bit faster than the ZX Spectrum. Again, guys, I'm only doing this via emulation. I can't remember whether the actual Amstrad version did play faster than the ZX Spectrum version. So I do apologise about that. Alright, again, it controls really well. The sound effects are very similar to the ZX Spectrum version. Now, the only thing, if I compare this to the Spectrum version, okay, colour-wise, this beats it hands down. The sound effects are basically exactly the same thing. It's just really a matter of choice whether you prefer the tight control system of the ZX Spectrum version, where it does feel a little bit more arcadey. You can get around those corners a little bit better, but this version has got that illusion of speed. I mean, the graphics again are absolutely stunning. This doesn't have like the fancy intro like the ZX Spectrum had with that music. I'm using my turbo down there again. So guys, yeah, I'm not going to tell you who the winner of today's 8-bit war is just yet until after the Commodore 64 version, and that's when you'll see, you know, who the winner is. But like I said, guys, it's definitely not going to be the Commodore 64 because that version, which is coming out shortly, is absolutely appalling. You know, great conversion for the Amstrad here. Right, now here we go, Chase HQ on the Commodore 64. Now listen to the music on the Commodore 64 version. Now normally with the Commodore 64, you had the SID chip, and the SID chip, hey, was absolutely amazing. You know, it's a lot better than the AY chip. But this time round, I've got to admit that the ZX Spectrum version is so much better, the music, than the Commodore 64 version. They could have done the music so much better. Right, so as you can see from the little title screen there as well, it's not the most colourfulest Commodore 64 game. But again, games, you know, it's not all to do with colour. You know, the Spectrum had loads of sort of like amazing gameplay, but no colour. And again, I just don't find the music in this particular game as good as the ZX Spectrum version. The Commodore 64, you expected it just to completely wow you and dazzle you, because sometimes I actually found that the Commodore 64 had even better music than the actual arcade game, because the SID chip was just an amazing chip. You know, it just did like amazing stuff, and this isn't the greatest, I've got to say, really isn't. It is, you know, I do like the arcade music. The arcade music's really good. It's really memorable. I'm not saying this butchers it, but it's not as good as the ZX Spectrum version. Right, so first of all, you know, guys, if any of the programmers are listening to this video, or watching the video I should say, I do apologise if I do sound a little bit harsh, but this isn't the greatest conversion. This is probably one of the worst arcade conversions on the Commodore 64. You know, you'd come to expect a lot more from the Commodore 64 rather than this, you know. I'll tell you what's wrong with it. First of all, there's no real illusion of speed, okay? It doesn't feel like you're moving. the cars don't quite look right. They look like they're hovering as opposed to sort of like racing along the road. I mean, they look like little sort of like spaceships or cars from Back to the Future, basically. Alright, and let's talk about the colour. Yeah, there is no colour, and you know why that is? Because apparently what they actually did, I don't know whether it was like a bit of a rush job, but they took the Spectrum port, sort of reprogrammed it onto the Commodore 64, same graphics, whatever, and then just they layered on sort of just a splash of colour. And I'll be honest, guys, that didn't work. It really didn't work. It's one of the worst looking Commodore 64 games. The Commodore 64 was capable of so much more. You had some nice racers on there, like Power Drift was a good racer. I even think Outrun on the Commodore 64 was better than this. You know, this was a big disappointment. You know, it was one of those games that I used to really wind up like some of my old school friends who were Commodore 64 owners, even though I had a Commodore 64. But back in the days, you know, I was a bit of a ZX Spectrum fanboy. And yeah, when this came out, I went to school, and I went, so how did you find that Commodore 64 conversion of Chase HQ? And the looks on their faces was just like, because they had sort of seen, or probably read in the magazines, how good the ZX Spectrum or the Amstrad versions were. And those conversions are two of the finest conversions, you know, like of Chase HQ, pretty much on any machine, really. Nah, I'm not too impressed with this in the slightest. Right, guys, now it's time to choose a winner. It's going to be a tough one. It's either going to be the ZX Spectrum or the Amstrad. The Amstrad's a lot more colourful, moves a little bit faster, but the Spectrum, believe it or not, it may lack the colour, but has a little bit more like the arcade. I'm the Real Local Maniac, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.